Hey everyone, welcome to Cyber-Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. Today, Vern and I are concluding our conversation about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. If you haven't already, please click like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the show. But anyway, one thing that I don't...
So the battle begins with Palpatine saying, "Wipe them out, all of them." That's when the third act really begins.
Yeah. And some people love this and other people don't like it. I come down on the side that I don't like it, which is the fact that every single movie up to this point, George Lucas expanded the number of battles. In the first movie, it was the X-Wings versus the Death Star. In The Empire Strikes Back, it was Luke fighting Vader, and it was Leia
Running
and
for their
Lando
lives.
and everyone trying to escape the city. In
Yep.
the third one, it was the group on Endor trying to blow up the shield generator. It was the spaceships fighting the Death Star, and it was Luke fighting Darth Vader. So now we had three
Which is by
fights.
far the best of the three battles.
What
By
Luke
far,
Luke
like that
versus
established a Star Wars like battle. You've got primitives on the ground, you've got spaceships in the sky, and then you've got a real heartfelt family tragedy unfolding at the tip of a lightsaber. And which one of those are more important? They're all critical to each other. They're all integral. They're all happening simultaneously. That is unique to Star Wars.
yeah,
I can't imagine anything more Star Wars than that.
but then with Episode One, Lucas went even further and gave us four
Yeah.
battles at once. And
Yes.
this
Yes.
was
And I love that.
See, I didn't like that. And it's because I felt, and I've said this before, I felt more emotion from a single lightsaber fight between Vader and Luke than I did with Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and Padmé
It's a
against the
lot of pieces.
Neimoidians.
It's a lot of pieces working simultaneously. I get that.
Yeah,
It's a lot to take in.
it
But
is.
but
And
we're also talking about a much more sophisticated generation. We're not. I mean, let's face it. You remember the '80s as much as I do. In the '80s, we were pretty easily pleased by two people going at it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
By the time 1999 came around, we've already got a much more sophisticated, multitasking generation of people that are starting to light up to cell phones. And so, I'm not saying that we needed more explosions to entertain us. I'm just saying that I feel like we were capable of tracking more things at once. And let's face it, the final battle of Phantom Menace does take place over the course of, if I'm not mistaken, over a half an hour. It is a long, drawn out series of events. It's a lot of action, and there's plenty of time to spend time with the lightsabers, and then spend time with the spaceships, and then spend time with the Gungans. We do get a full mouthful of each one of those things going on.
yeah, but I think part of it was because I still did not care about the Gungans, so I didn't want to see them. I didn't really care. I didn't really care that much about Padmé's fight against the Neimoidians because they still are pretty much useless. So I
Well,
didn't
that was
feel,
central.
yeah,
Padme's
I
fight was
know how
central. That
important.
was the fight that was going to free Naboo.
I'm not saying it wasn't important to the story. I'm saying it wasn't that important to me. Like I didn't feel a connection to the characters because I just didn't care. And that took me out of enjoyment, or that took away from my enjoyment
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
every time the Gungans came on screen, I was like,
That's
oh, we got to deal with the Gungans again. And then
That's
Natalie
interesting
Portman came on the
because
screen, and I was like,
because we're well.
and I just
That's
felt like I
interesting,
wanted to
Josh,
go
because
back to the, yeah,
Naboo is a beautiful Earth-like planet, and the Gungans are an advanced race of cool frog people, very Star Warsy, that live in underwater cities with shields. And people of Theed, the people that represent the Naboo, are obviously highly advanced with a very beautiful culture, with beautiful architecture. 'Cause that indicates that we're dealing with a culture full of poetry and art and sculpture and philosophy. This is obviously a planet that has seen a lot of peace, and we get little glimpses, little Star Warsy glimpses of an ancient culture, an ancient civilization that has lived on Naboo for possibly tens of thousands, if not millions of years. We get these giant statues that are on their side, all overgrown with grass, just giving these little hints of history on the planet. This is an Earth-like planet that is beautiful and a new location in the Star Wars universe that we do not want to see destroyed, because it is a representative of the Republic. It is a planet of freedom. It was innocent, and now it's under assault. And it's not only under assault by these frog-like monsters in space, but they're sending a bunch of droids like cowards. They're being attacked by Terminators. So we have this beautiful culture. Two beautiful cultures on an Earth-like planet that we can relate to, that worship freedom and represent the Republic and the old glory days of the Star Wars galaxy, being guarded by the Jedi, and now they're being assaulted by an army of Terminators. I'm sorry, what part of that do we not care about?
I
How
didn't
could we
say
not care about that?
I didn't feel a connection to those characters because
And I'm asking you how that's possible.
I
How many movies did we have to spend with the Gungans before you could care that we have a free group of people in the Star Wars universe that are being assaulted by an aggressive attacker
well,
from beyond their own planet?
I think at the end of the day, it would have been, I would have been happy with one movie if the Gungans had been more interesting, but I didn't find them interesting
How
because
could they not be interesting?
the representative of the Gungans to me was Jar Jar, and I didn't find him interesting. I found him
But
annoying,
he's one of millions.
but
And
we
these
don't know the
guys
others.
have we have these beautiful pod-like cities, and they've got these really cool original Star Warsy kind of submarines. And then the first time we see them emerge out of the mist with their army, it's like they're riding on these giant, like, bird-like things, and they've got these giant cows with like machinery on their back. I mean, I was having like Dinotopia flashbacks. It's so cool seeing these humanoid intelligent creatures in the Star Wars universe riding on the backs of primitive mounts that are towing some kind of weird futuristic technology. Love it. I mean, you could fast forward to the beginning of the Battle of Naboo, and right off the bat I am on the edge of my seat just because of the imagination alone. This is an incredibly beautiful, imaginative, very, very Star Wars moment. And then as the camera pans around, they're in this vast open green field representing under a beautiful blue sky with puffy white clouds. The whole scene represents the beauty of this place that's under assault. And this is where the battle is going to be. The droids show up, they're vastly outnumbered, and it's just everything about it just reeks of Star Wars. And I
I'm
think
not saying
once the
it
battle
doesn't,
begins,
and I don't want to take that away from you. I'm not trying to. But you asked, and this was my
yeah, yeah,
reaction, which was
yeah, I got
I
it.
didn't feel a connection, and so every time the Gungans came on screen, I was like, "Oh, can we get back to to the Jedi fighting?" And even the Jedi fighting, I wasn't that happy about, but we'll get to that in a second.
Well,
Um,
you knew Darth Maul a heck of a lot less than you knew the Gungans at that point.
I know,
The
and
fact that he looks like the devil and has messed up yellow teeth is enough for us to hate him.
yeah, yeah.
But we didn't really know too much about
But it
him,
wasn't that I
except
liked
for the fact
him.
that
But I wasn't that I was interested in him. I was interested in Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. But I have other issues with the lightsaber fight, which we will get to in a second. But to
okay,
continue the thing about the Gungans, like I understand why you liked it, but to me it was just like I don't care about the Gungans, so I just wanted it to be done. And this was part of why the movie didn't grab me the way it grabbed you, because we had four battles, and two of them I didn't care that much about. Um, and the spaceship flying Anakin was still annoying me. Uh, and yeah, like it was like all of them
yeah.
fell flat to me.
Yeah, I could
It was
definitely see why Anakin would annoy the same way Jar Jar annoyed. But I think that everything Anakin did was very, very clearly a demonstration that the Force was with him. He's like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. Let me push this random button. Oh, that
Yeah,
closed the cockpit. Now
yeah.
what do? I
Let's
pull
do a
this random
flip. Here,
lever. Well,
that'll be a
that's
neat trick in the middle of a
right,
battle.
right. Well, he's the whole time he's acting like a natural 10-year-old, but everything he's doing is surgically precise because the Force is strong with him. I mean, that is such an important element. It does seem hokey if you're like, what? This 10-year-old is just randomly getting everything right. Well, that's fine if you're telling a World War II story, but this is the Star Wars galaxy. Everything he does is guided by the Force, and it's very obvious that he is just a vessel and the Force is doing all the work, and he's making commentary like you would expect a 10-year-old to make commentary. He
Yeah,
doesn't even know what he's doing.
yeah, but that's another part of the problem because at this point I assumed that Anakin was the main character, but the main character does his actions. He's the one who we root for because he's in charge. And Anakin never takes action. Everything is being done around him, and he doesn't really do anything. He's just present, and that seemed even more in this space
Yeah,
battle.
well,
He was doing
no, but
tricks,
that's
and the Force may have been working through him, but that's not a main character. That's a guy who's got stuff
he's not
happening
really a
for
main
him.
character, is he?
No,
I
he
don't think he
isn't.
is a
That's the
main
thing.
character. I think really the story is sort of building up. This is his prequel.
Well, this
This
is,
is Anakin's prequel. He's
yeah.
not really conscious. He's not really conscious of his ability yet. He's totally innocent, which I think is another thing that I think the Force is drawn to in the Star Wars universe is innocence.
Mm,
And I think that by the time we see him the next time in Attack of the Clones, he's got training, he's got maturity, he's lost some of his innocence, but he's fully aware of what the Force is doing in him. So in this movie, the Force is really a more of a main character than Anakin is. And let's face it, the only one that we really have an attachment to is possibly R2D2, but more appropriately Obi-Wan Kenobi.
uh, I don't know, but
That's just me.
again, this is why I felt like so now we've got three of the battles that I didn't feel particularly excited about, and then we have the lightsaber fight, and I don't mind saying like the choreography was great, but I've said this before, I don't
Yeah,
like it. I don't like the
yeah,
fact that it's a
I get it.
dance routine because, and maybe this is a flaw in myself. I've always been fascinated by fencing and sword fighting, and so I've studied it, even though I'm like completely not athletic and I am like not capable of taking part in it myself, but I can study it. And there is no reason for them to be doing the stuff that they're doing. It's just a dance routine. And when I watch it, that's what I see. And if anyone's listening, what I really want you to do is I want you to take the lightsaber fight of Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and put on some disco music in the background because I would pay money to watch that. Okay, Disco Inferno.
Oh my God, Josh, I got a treat for you. You've clearly never seen Oral Knots, have you?
No, I've never heard of it.
Oh my gosh. So the listening audience out there, free plug, there's a channel called Oral Knots, AURALNAUTS on YouTube, and they have spoofed every single one of the Star Wars movies at length. Their spoofs are like 20 minutes long per movie, and they they do all the lightsaber battles as though the Jedi are having a dance party. And if you really want to see what you just described, you are in luck because every single one of the Jedi battles that you know of in the movies have been put to a disco beat, and it's clear that they feel the same way that you do about it. Because I just thought it was funny, but now that you're mentioning it, it seems like they felt the same way you did about it. The whole they completely rewrote the stories so that the Jedi are basically like strung out on drugs, and they're always looking for another fix, and they're like they everybody thinks that they're heroes, but they really just kind of show up and happen to handle things, and they've like redubbed all the dialogue so that it looks like they're saying one thing, but they're actually saying another thing. It's very expertly done. You've got to check it out.
We might have to put
You
the
want to
link
see?
on that on
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, I'll send you the link, and you could put it
Yeah, yeah.
on the thing because if you watch the first one and you don't like it, then you're good. But if you
Yeah.
do, there's plenty more after that, and you can see every single Jedi battle that's ever been made done to a disco track.
Yeah. But that's so. then I guess you can see what I'm talking about. Like this is, and we've talked about this a little bit before. We're going to talk about it again when next week when we talk about um, Attack of the Clones. But that movie was my favorite lightsaber fight of the prequel trilogy, specifically, not of all time, because my favorite of all time, I think, is Obi-Wan versus Darth Vader in Episode 4.
Mm.
The least technically amazing, there is very little choreography. It looks like two old men swinging sticks at each other, but that's the one that I felt was more emotional and more heartfelt than anything we saw in the sequels. But I mean, I'm sorry, the prequels. But looking at just the three prequels, my favorite is the lightsaber fight between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku in Episode 2. I did not like Darth Maul versus Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in Episode 1 because it looks too choreographed and it takes me out of the story. It doesn't look like they're doing it. They're not doing anything for any reason. There's one particular shot that really annoys me, which is uh, Darth Maul, like he dodges or blocks one of Qui-Gon's he parries him, and then he does this flippy. I don't know. He's like flips in the air with both his feet off of the ground and then lands. And it looks like at first I thought maybe he was doing it to get his leg out of the way because Obi-Wan kind of swiped at him at his leg. But I looked very closely. His lightsaber was nowhere near Maul's leg. So it looks like Maul is doing this flip for no freaking reason at all. And then he uses the Force to pick up a piece of debris and open a door. That to give you context of where it is. But every single time they do these flourishes, it bugs me because no sword fighter would ever do that. Because every single time you do a flourish, you risk throwing yourself off balance. And the second you're off
No,
balance, you lose.
no sword fighter in this galaxy. We're talking about sword fighters that can manipulate the force around their body to make them more balanced, to make them more sturdy, to make them more powerful,
There's
to make
still
them jump higher, to make them land softer.
there's still
So I
no
don't know.
reason
I
there's
don't know.
still
I
no
feel like
reason
this
for
thing
him to
is
do
so
that flip
much
thing.
fantasy. Maybe, but I feel like we're dealing with so much fantasy here that I mean, I don't. The rules of normal human combat on Earth in the 21st century, in my opinion, don't have a whole lot of bearing on these
I don't
fantastical
know.
moments in another galaxy.
We
And by the
see
way, the follow up of that scene that you're talking about, the
Mhm.
follow up of that flip that Ray Park does,
Yeah.
is so awesome. It's one of the coolest things I think Maul ever does is when he just it with absolute confidence and no hesitation, he points at something on the ground and then he points at the control on the door and it flies out and hits the door and opens up the door, which gives him a chance to continue to back up because he's about to be backed up against the wall and he just dominates that thing and he opens the door and it's just it's such a subtle thing but it's so confident and cool and scary because we've all seen Vader throw things around, but like this is a very forceful, direct use of the Force that I think establishes his character as a confident, dangerous character. Now, the flourish, the kick, the jump that he does seem to be pointless in the battle, but I try to remember that they're not doing it for nothing. They're doing it because it's visually spectacular and this is a movie.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, I get the choreography because it's a movie and it's way more spectacular than a couple of old men swinging sticks at each other. And no offense to the original battle, I love the original lightsaber battle between Vader and Obi-Wan.
Mhm.
And number two, we're dealing with a different type of combat here. We're dealing with the kind of combat that has a variable in it that's way beyond our comprehension. And I don't know if that answers the problem, but it does allow me to sort of lean back a little bit. And I do hate this term, but I'm going to go ahead and use it to get my point across. It allows me to check my brain aside and just enjoy the spectacle.
Yeah, yeah. I get that because that's the impression I got watching the movie was well, I mean watching the lightsaber fights in the prequels, it's all spectacle and no substance. And that was what was bugging me because I wanted substance. I don't like
Mm.
that flip. And we do see later on, and we'll talk about this when we get to it, but episode 3, Anakin actually does lose his balance. Doing one of his little flourishes or something, he lands on that thing that's floating over the lava, and he loses his balance and visibly has to hold his arms out to balance himself. And Obi-Wan could have cut him in half, except he didn't because Obi-Wan was too busy doing a freaking flourish. And if he hadn't been
Hmm.
flourishing, the fight would have been over. And that's why he didn't, kill Anakin right then and there because he should have. We'll talk about
Yeah,
that when we
it's
get to episode 3.
okay. Yeah,
But
when we get to that movie, yeah.
yeah,
I don't want to like continuously be looking. I don't want to sound like I'm continuously trying to prove you wrong, but I challenge you to go back and watch that duel with Maul
Maul.
before he opens the door. The duel with Maul. Obi-Wan in that duel, if you analyze that move, he takes a low swing that Maul blocks with his double-sided saber. And then he Obi-Wan rears back for another hit and he takes a long sweeping arm's length low shot at Maul, and Maul spins out of the way, lifting his right leg. His right side is toward Obi-Wan. He spins out of the way and lifts his right leg completely out of the way. Now Obi-Wan's lightsaber misses him by probably 4 or 5 feet, but in that when I'm dueling with lightsabers, there is no coming back from a single hit. That lightsaber will take my leg right off.
Yeah,
And so Maul seems to be responding to a full swipe by Obi-Wan. In fact, there's a couple of frames where you could see Obi-Wan's blue lightsaber literally taking up the space where Maul's right leg was.
yeah,
So he does that flourish to get out of the way of Obi-Wan. He also is getting crowded in by Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, so he's going to back up toward the door to give himself a little more fighting space. And then the first thing he does is command that piece of debris to open up the door so he's not backed up against the wall. So
yeah.
on one hand, I would argue that, well, these are space wizards and the rules are not the same. I would also argue, well, it's Star Wars, so check your brain and just enjoy the spectacle. But actually, if you go back and analyze that, there's a good reason for everything that you're having a doubt for.
I know that he did. Like I said, I did see that Obi-Wan was taking a sweep at his leg, but the flip was unnecessary. I think any swordsman
But
would
Maul
have
is an
moved his.
acrobat, though. He just
I think he would
exaggeratively
have
deals
moved
with
his.
everything.
I think he would have moved his leg out of the way without putting himself at a disadvantage or a possible disadvantage if he had landed
Sure.
badly.
Sure, he
Um,
would have. You know why? You know why? Because a swordsman doesn't have the force. A swordsman can't float through the air. A swordsman can't rely on an invisible field to plant his feet on the ground like concrete. Of
but
course, a swordsman would do
it
that.
took
This
me
is
out of
not
the
a
movie.
swordsman. This is a Sith
I get that.
acolyte.
I get that. But it pulled me out of the movie. Just,
Okay, well,
just,
what we've established is
yeah,
what it is that pulled you out of the movie and why it is that I enjoy it.
yeah, yeah. And like
Whatever
I've
the
said,
listener thinks, that's
yeah,
up to them.
and like I've said many times, I understand why people like it, because technically it's very well done. Like the choreographer was really good at his job, um, and I don't want to take anything away from that. It's
Creating
just,
spectacle.
yeah, yeah. But to me, that's
Yeah.
all it was spectacle.
And and I would also, and here's another point. I'm trying to defend what the story was about and not just say, yeah, it was for kids. But one of the things that Lucas tried to do, and I hate to say this from an adult to a bunch of adults, but we have to keep in mind, Lucas made Star Wars for little kids.
Hmm.
And we were all little kids. We, as in our generation, we were all little kids when it came out, and it made an incredible impact on all the dudes that were fathers by the time Phantom Menace came out. Phantom Menace was not just a chance to pick up where he left off and tell the backstory. Phantom Menace was a chance to capture another generation of merchandise buyers.
Yep.
And so again, Phantom Menace, the sequel, the prequel trilogy as a whole, but in particular the Phantom Menace, was made for kids that weren't just going to watch the old clunky sci-fi movies that their dads liked, but they're going to have their own new sci-fi movie that is way more spectacular and way bigger in scale. And so one of the things that I see in this quote unquote spectacle between these three, two heroes and one villain is just the simple colors of the blades. You get, we've never seen four lightsaber blades in a single duel before, and now we're seeing four lightsaber blades in a single duel, and they're specifically psychologically selected to be green and blue, the colors of coolness and goodness, and red, doubled up on the red, so it looks like the green and blue is like outnumbered.
Hmm.
And so there's definitely sort of a coloring book elementary school, psychology study to the colors and the spectacle being on display here. I promise you, there isn't an 8, 10, 12, 14-year old anywhere that was watching this movie and going, that's not what fencing is all about.
Well, yeah,
And
that's
so,
true.
just
I,
yeah,
I,
just to cut the movie a break a little bit by just realizing that Lucas was really trying to capture another generation of kids, and he succeeded.
yeah, well, yeah, and that's why I say that's what bothered me about it. But I
Yeah,
completely
and you were a
understand
grown
why
man, and so
people,
was
yeah,
I.
yeah, but
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand
I
why
get that.
people like it. So one
Yeah, I
last
get
thing
that.
that we do, because we kind of got to wrap this up. But one other thing,
Mm.
so we finished the battles, and we get to the end of the
Uh,
movie.
yep. Anakin blows up the droid control ship purely out of blind luck.
Hmm.
It's just the force. He gets hit and he spins out of control and goes directly into the hangar bay. Well,
Yeah,
that's a eye-rolling stupidity.
yeah,
No, that's the force controlling his ship.
yeah, I
And
get it.
then he manages to slide right through the slalom into the deep part of the ship. He comes to a halt, and what is he facing? He's literally facing
The main
the
reactor. Yeah,
internal battery reactors, right? Well, that's not eye-rolling stupidity. That's the force. He pulls on a random trigger. He doesn't even understand where the weapon controls are, and he happens to activate the torpedoes and launches torpedoes underneath the shield directly at the reactor. All I see is God over and over and over again. All I see is the force controlling the outcome of this battle and taking something minuscule and weak and doing something impossible with him, and it leads to a happy ending. So
yeah.
again, I'm just excusing this whole thing. I think all these eye rolling moments are easily explained.
I agree, but again, it didn't work for me. But I like
Hmm.
the ending though because again, I always enjoy it when bad guys lose, and
Yeah,
that
and
was
that's a
the moment.
childish thing. You and I are on the same page on that one. It's
Yeah,
it's a little childish, but we really like it when the bad guys lose and there's a
I
happy
love it when
ending.
a bad guy loses, and I don't like it to be anticlimactic, meaning I don't want the bad guy to lose so quickly that he doesn't realize he lost. That's the
Yeah.
worst thing for me is when a bad guy loses very suddenly and doesn't have a second to realize he's lost. Um,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
probably
well,
very childish of me, but
the
that's,
yeah, maybe
yeah,
you want him to suffer, and I don't, I get that. I'm not going to condemn that. that's
yeah,
that's yeah, you want him to suffer in proportion to the suffering that he has created.
yeah, yeah,
And we don't really know how much suffering for all we know, Darth Maul could have just been very devoted as a student to Palpatine and never hurt anybody before this.
yeah, yeah.
We,
Well,
but he
we,
looks like the devil
well,
and his teeth are
you've seen the
messed up.
Clone
So
Wars. You've seen the Clone Wars. You
yeah,
know that
I
he
know.
wasn't a saint.
I know.
Um,
Well, I'm trying to take the mind of somebody who's seeing the Phantom Menace for the very first time. Like, you
yeah.
don't really, other than the fact that he looks like the devil and his teeth are messed up. There's no reason to hate on the guy. Sure, he hates our Jedi friends,
Well,
but
he
I mean, we
kills
don't know if
Qui-Gon
he's got
though.
a lot.
He kills our
Well,
hero.
at that point,
Yeah.
yes, at that point he killed Qui-Gon, and that means he needs to die. But he also killed Qui-Gon kind of suddenly, so maybe a sudden death for him is fair. I don't know.
Maybe he doesn't get a sudden death though, and that's why I found it fulfilling. He gets cut in half, and even if we didn't know that he ultimately will survive getting
Yeah, he
chopped in
didn't even
half,
get a death.
he you see him, you've got a good close up of his face, and he's like, "Oh shit,
Yeah,
I just got
yep.
chopped in
I
half."
just lost. I
Yeah,
just
and you
lost.
see
Yeah, I
him
love that.
say, like you can kind of see that thought crossing his mind as he
Yeah.
falls into the shaft before ultimately falling into two pieces the rest of the
And
way
the death
down.
of Qui-Gon is very appropriate, I think, because Obi-Wan is lost at that point,
Yeah,
and the final desire of his master was that he take on training Anakin, which I think he would have had a real problem doing if it hadn't been the final wish of his master.
yeah.
And that, of course, leads to
Well, one
Qui-Gon's
thing I wanted
funeral.
you, well, there was one thing
Yeah,
though
go ahead, go ahead.
that did bother me, which was in that force field hall that
Mm-hmm.
we saw at the beginning of the movie Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon could both force run really, really fast. I think
Oh yeah.
when Qui-Gon fought Maul after the force field door opened and Obi-Wan ran, maybe that would have been a good time to use a force run to get there before the force field closed.
Maybe.
Because
But I
then
have
maybe Qui-Gon wouldn't have lost.
yeah, I have something to say about that as well. Again, we're talking about the Force here. I think it's maybe not intelligent to say that the Jedi who recognize themselves as servants of the Force are in charge of the Force. I think that we hear the Jedi say, "I think our we need to let the Council know that our ability to use the Force is diminished." I think that the Force does what the Force wants to do, and that if you are sensitive to it, you can do certain things at certain times, but you don't always have complete control of the Force. It's very possible that they had the capacity to have super speed in the beginning of the Phantom Menace, but by the end of the Phantom Menace, especially in the presence of this sort of signal jamming Sith that they didn't even know existed, it's possible that their ability to use the Force was somewhat diminished, and that was one of those super sensitive uses of the Force that they
Yeah,
just
but
couldn't do.
that's one
So
of
I'm
those.
going out on a limb here,
Yeah.
but it is a plausible explanation that puts us back where we want to be, which is sort of, I don't want to say victims or leaves on the wind, but like users of the Force, children of the Force, not masters of the Force.
Yeah, and I get that, and it's a good explanation. It's just, once again, I don't like it that we have to come up with the explanation.
Mm, yeah, but again, I'll go back one more time to that whole
Yeah,
Star
I
Wars
get
is
it.
really
I
deep and complex,
understand.
and we do make up a lot of things about it.
I understand. Yeah,
So
but
yeah, so Qui-Gon dies, and it leads us to Qui-Gon's funeral, which is a very beautiful scene because it
mhm.
does sort of have shades of the
Of the Darth
funeral pyre
Vader,
that
yeah,
Luke
yeah,
lights with his father, and so there's that, and then it gives us that quiet firelight conversation between Mace and Yoda, which is very revealing about the Sith
yeah.
always only
Always
having
two there
two.
are. Yeah. So,
Which I really love. Like that wasn't a thing in the lore that I'm aware of until Phantom Menace, and I really love that idea because that's the problem with evil. Fundamentally, evil does not cooperate with itself. Evil eats its own, and
mhm.
so if you have a whole bunch of evil people, what's going to happen is everybody's going to take advantage of
Yeah,
and kill each other until there's a master in charge of everything, which is what all evil people want,
yeah,
and then
exactly.
one other person
Look at the Terran Empire in the Mirror Universe in Star Trek. Same
no
thing.
matter what,
Yeah.
even in real life, like there's always going to be somebody in charge because that's what all evil wants is to have power over everything else. And then you got some lapdog who can do your bidding and your dirty work, but that you always keep at arm's reach, and that is always continually looking for a weakness that he can exploit to take you down, and then he can have all the power.
Mhm.
And that's I think that's an excellent summation of the Sith, and I think it gets a little obliterated when you go back to the days of the High Republic and stuff where the old Republic where you have all these guys with red lightsabers. Well, that's very epic if you want to have some cool scene that is so much bigger and better than the Star Wars movies, but it's kind of like I don't know if that would last very long. I think eventually you'd end up with only two of them.
Mhm. Yeah, I didn't have a problem with that.
Well,
But then we,
but I get the rules changed. Like at some point, I don't know the whole lore, but at some point, some big Sith said, "No, we're not doing this anymore. We got to do it this way." And
mhm,
so I get that. Like 10,000 years ago, it wasn't like that. Okay, that I understand.
yeah. But then we get to the finale, which is the parade,
Yeah, yeah.
and would be remiss if I didn't mention how much like the true genius of John Williams,
Oh
because
yeah,
John
the theme.
Williams, not just, I mean, like, I love everything he does, but I've often said like Duel of the Fates, the score for the fight, the lightsaber fight.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was not my favorite of his new music for the prequels. Um, it wasn't
Did you
my,
know
it's
that
not
Duel of
that
the
it was,
Fates, the lyrics in Duel of the Fates that they're singing are not random. They actually are drawn from ancient languages.
I don't
Just,
know if
just,
I had
just
heard
an
that,
aside.
but
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that. No, I know that for a fact.
Mhm.
It was something I saw about Williams himself. So
Yeah.
anyway,
But
he himself was explaining what the words in the song mean.
okay. But yeah, so Duel of the Fates wasn't like I liked it, but I didn't love it. But oh my God, was the parade music amazing because
Yeah.
of what it is. Like, and so many people didn't realize it. It's the Emperor's theme.
Yes, yes,
It's
but
the
it's
Emperor
done
theme
on a
with
different
major
key
tones. Yes.
to a higher beat. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a faster tempo and a
absolutely
major and
genius.
using major keys instead of minor keys. So, yeah, absolutely pure genius and I absolutely love that. And every single time I watch the movie, I have to listen to the music. I barely even pay attention to what's going on screen at this point because the music is what gets me.
Absolutely,
So,
and it is very much complemented by what's on the screen as well, because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just it sounds so celebratory. Not just that, but you can hear the clacking of the drumsticks, and it sounds very percussiony, like a college,
Yeah, like a marching band.
band playing,
Yeah.
like a marching band, and obviously seeing Theed fully restored and in the height of its beauty, and all the people happy and cheering, and that's just it's a great moment.
Yeah. And
And
I
then, of course, Star Wars is famous for ending on all of the main characters all posed, and
and no
and
speaking
that
and generally
final
no
shot
speaking.
is so Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
generally no speaking.
Yeah.
It's such a Star Wars moment there where you see
Everyone.
Padme
Yeah.
is now revealed as the queen, and she looks down at Anakin. Anakin looks up at her with like a sly smirk on his face, and
Yeah.
it's like they're still kids, but you know that something's coming between the two of them. That's a hint of the future. And then that final shot where Boss Nass holds up the big glowing crystal, whatever, we don't
Yeah.
even know what the hell that is,
Yeah.
and everybody's all arrayed and posed and looking very nice. It's reminiscent of the end of the first movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
the
of
Star
course we
Wars
get
Episode
the
4.
and of course we get one thing that I did like was seeing Anakin with that braid in his hair
Oh yeah,
to signify that
the
he
new
is a
Padawan.
Padawan
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
you know,
And another thing I think we'd be remiss to leave out is watching Palpatine show up in his Twinkie ship,
yeah,
announcing that he's the new Supreme Chancellor,
yeah,
and flanked by Imperial guards in blue robes, but they are absolutely Imperial guards.
yeah,
That is such a tasty little tease of what's to come.
yeah,
All you got to do is take those Imperial guards, paint them red, and then put a black visor over the front of their helmets, and you've got exactly those faceless,
yep,
scary guys that were guarding the Emperor's throne from Return of the Jedi.
yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. So I
So
think
anyway,
we both can
I think
agree that
that's
the
the
ending
Phantom
was
Menace,
good.
and I think that everybody can understand why it is that you had problems with it, and I think everybody can understand why it is that I love it, and everybody makes up their own mind.
Yeah, and because it's so important to us, I'm glad of the fact that I could share what I didn't like, you shared what you did like, and we're still friends. Hey, look everyone, I didn't have
It's
to call him
possible.
a jerk because
Yeah.
how dare he like the Phantom Menace, and he didn't have to call
Yeah.
me a shill because or no, you wouldn't call me a shill because I didn't like it.
No, you're not a shill. You didn't get out there and tell everybody that you liked it.
Yeah,
You're just a moron for not liking it.
no.
It's so much simpler than that.
Yeah, but the point is, we don't have to resort to that because we're two grown men. I don't know why the world can't seem to figure that one out, but we're two
But you
grown
nailed it
people
though,
that
Josh. You
what?
nailed it. You said because it's important to us. I
Yeah,
think that's really like first of all, it's important to us enough to love. It's important to us enough to share our opinions, even if they're diverse. It's important for enough for us to do this podcast. But I think also, in all mercy, in all understanding, I think that's why so many people get so emotional and why they get seething full of hatred and throw rotten fruit at each other because it's important to them. And that's something that not a lot of entertainment franchises can evoke out of people.
I can
So
understand. I
yeah,
can completely understand that, but only to a point. There is what I've been seeing lately is people are saying it's irrevocable. It cannot be saved. They say Star Wars is dead, and that's what I think is wrong because no matter what, as long as they keep making Star Wars content, even if you hate whatever came out last, even if you hate everything that's come out in the last couple of years, the next thing might be brilliant. What's the last thing that came? Skeleton Crew, and a lot of people liked it. But before that was the Acolyte, and everyone was saying Star Wars is dead. They can't possibly make anything good. And then Skeleton Crew proved they can still make good things. So what I
there's
want
always hope. Always
I
hope.
want people to recognize the fact that Star Wars is not dead because My
No.
biggest fear when it comes to Star Wars is that Disney, being the owners of the property, they're going to decide there's no more money to be made. They're never going to sell it. They're just going to lock it in a vault and seal it away for, until it becomes public domain and they have no right to hold on to it anymore. And by that time, no one will even remember it was a thing.
But like, why? Why would we want to do that?
Yeah,
Let's just have hope that Star Wars is everything that Star Wars has ever been, and that it absolutely at any moment could come back with something that blows our minds.
that's
It
what
very well could.
that's what I want. Anyone who's listening to this show who is completely against me because I like the sequels and think that Star Wars is dead says that Kathleen Kennedy is the destroyer of Star Wars completely and they will not forgive anything that Disney does. I want those people specifically to understand there is always hope and we have to hold on to that. If you truly love Star Wars, don't give up on it because the next thing might be better, might win you
I
back if
think
you allow it
I
to.
think everybody who loves Star Wars, I think if Disney was to suddenly come out with something that blew our minds, I think the vast majority of us would be right back in front of our TVs at the edge of our seats and starting new YouTube channels and writing successful blogs and like that engine can be restarted with just the bare minimum amount of fuel.
I hope
All we need
so.
is something that doesn't torque everybody off and divide us.
I hope
That's all.
so. I hope that you're right. But the way I see people acting on the internet, on social media, doesn't give me a whole lot of hope. It seems like
Eh,
people are completely
don't
dead
listen so
set.
close.
Well,
Don't
maybe.
listen so close, Josh.
Yeah.
People are hyperbolic, especially about things that are quote unquote important to them.
Yeah.
Things that are important to them. Why do you think history is full of religious wars? Because the things that really matter to people, they get hyperbolic about. They get exaggerative about. Everybody right now is not pissed at Star Wars. They're pissed that they're not getting the Star Wars that they want. And
Yeah.
so, if you calculate that properly, all you have to do is give them what they want, and they will ignite like a bonfire that never went out.
I
I
guess
mean,
I
maybe
guess
I'm
we
just
just need to,
hopeful, but I think
yeah.
that's rational.
Well, I guess then I just hope that Disney figures out exactly what it is that people want. Because I thought that we got it when with most of the shows that came out. I've been a fan of almost all of the Star Wars shows. I don't think there's been a show that I didn't like at all. There are shows that I liked more than others, but there's not been a show that I was like, ugh, this sucks.
Well, let's have mercy on our audience and on each other and on our timeline
Yeah,
by saving that conversation
yeah,
because the Disney Plus shows are coming, and there's a lot to say about every single one of them, for better and for worse. And that is definitely another conversation because it gets very complex and it does start to hack at the heart of what has divided the Star Wars audience, for the last 10 years.
yeah. I would like to have that conversation with you. Hopefully, we can chisel out the time for
Hopefully,
that. So,
hopefully.
on that note, I guess we should wrap this up. So, I want to thank you again. I did let everyone know that there was an issue with your son, and he's doing better now. We did a special
Yes, he's
episode.
home.
Yeah. So I'm very thankful for that. I had all our listeners thinking of you and your son and sending good thoughts and prayers.
Really
Um,
appreciate that. Yeah,
so
he's home. He's recovering. It's probably going to be a few weeks. His kidneys are coming back to life, so that's all good. And then he's got a long road ahead of him. Some lifestyle changes and some things that need to happen to prevent this from happening in the future. But it was very serious and very dark for a moment there. So
well,
anybody who sent any prayers or anything, really appreciate it.
yeah. Well, I'm glad that everything worked out well. And so, everyone listening, next week we are going to continue our discussion of Star Wars by going on to episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I think that we have a lot to talk
Yay!
about with that one, too. Um, and in the meantime, as always, please remember, make tomorrow better than yesterday.